A long time ago, many moons back, in the 1990s on the Hopi REZ, a strange and deeply unsettling what the fuck type of incident took place. This is the background and story of that incident. It didn't exactly happen to me, but there's been very reliable sources that have confirmed that it did happen. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with witchcraft or the practice of it. Among the Hopi, it's real. People don't really talk about these things though. Bad things can happen. Say what you want about believing it or not, but it's prevalent in our area. It doesn't even require your belief. It's just there. I'm not an expert. I was just a rowdy REZ kid who grew up hearing the same kind of stories many of you have. It's those people, that family, that old creepy guy, or that lady. By the way, have you ever wondered where people do witchcraft on the REZ? There's rumors that there's caves where they meet, places where they shapeshift and practice all their witchy stuff. Then they come out, and they walk among us as we're asleep, spreading fear, jealousy, hatred, illnesses. That's why people say nothing good is out at night. It's the time when they come down from the caves, from the misas, from the mountains and do their evil deeds. Sometimes they bring bad luck, sicknesses, sometimes even death. We all know the stories. We all know the warnings, the rules, who to stay away from, where not to go. But none of this really matters if they come looking for you. On the east of my place, Shamopavi, about 11 miles away, there's 3 more villages on top of First Mesa. They sit close together. Well, one night, the police got a call. It was kinda late by Hopi standards. Now, a few days prior to this, someone had noticed a figure peering through their window. They went outside to confront whoever it was, but the person had already ran off. But then it started happening all around. A few days after, across all 3 villages, people started hearing strange noises, dogs barking, voices, laughing, someone looking in through the windows. The man would rush outside to go investigate, but every time that they went, they wouldn't find anybody. Eventually somebody called the police, which is when Hopi PD finally got a call about it. They thought it was just some kids messing around, causing trouble, scaring people. They were nearby, so they showed up within minutes. In true REZ cop fashion, way too many of them for a small job. They got out on foot and began patrolling the villages. Every corner, narrow alleys, cliff edges. It didn't take long before they spotted somebody suspicious. When they got close, the suspect ran. The chase was on. Everybody ran after the suspect, and they ended up on the rooftops. Apparently, this person gave the REZ cops a serious run for their money. Too much fry bread, I guess. But eventually, with numbers on their side, they surrounded the person, and this is where things take a hard what the fuck turn. When they finally caught the suspect, still resisting, they realized the person was dressed in traditional Hopi women's ceremonial clothing. Then they noticed something else. Once cuffed and no longer struggling, the cops saw the suspect was wearing a sheep hip bone mask. A full Scooby-Doo moment. They removed it. Underneath it was a small, gray hair, old woman. But it gets worse. She was from my own place, my own village. And I knew her very well. There's no such thing as a jail for witches. So they just took her to the Hopi PD jail. Still dressed like that. Imagine being the officer who had to take her. Alone. Anyways, what was she even doing out there? How was she jumping from rooftop to another? What were those cops thinking when they finally realized exactly who and what they were dealing with? And how do you even explain that to your spouse when you get home? Yeah, work was weird today. Just imagine for a moment being one of those officers chasing her through the darkness. Anyways, I had chosen not to use any names or go into finer details about the woman with the hip bone mask. She's real. and she is still alive and well. I have family back home to think about. A lot of people know who she is. But guess what? I don't live out there no more. I'm actually out here in Austin. I still got my dogs around, cedar, sweetgrass, and a bunch of other things that'll keep me safe. You just never know. Growing up, I had a childhood friend that lived really close by. We were like two peas in a pod. We were both adventurous. We believed in the paranormal, enjoyed astronomy, and we just liked being outside. She's from Alaska, and her dad had lived there for quite a while, so they were always into camping, hiking, fishing, skiing, you name it. It was with my friends and family that I got introduced to fishing and did a lot of camping. This happened during the mid to late 90s, and we were maybe around 10 to 12 years old. It's been a while, so I can't remember exactly. One camping trip, we went to this lake in the forest that was surrounded by a meadow, and feeding the lake was a small stream leading out of the woods. We played in the meadow and stream all day, while my friend's dad was just fishing. The lake wasn't very big, and because it had a meadow all around it, he was able to keep an eye on us while he fished. While messing around by the stream, for some reason, the wooded area it was coming from just gave me the weird vibes. I can't explain it. I just felt really uneasy. The day faded away into early evening, and it was time to leave and find a camping spot. My friend's dad packed up all his gear, and we all walked back to the truck. We drove into a more isolated area of the forest, and we made our way up this steep road that was rough. I was convinced that my friend's dad was going to break his truck. He did have a 4, maybe 6-cylinder Toyota pickup that was basic as a truck could get. In fact, not even sure if the truck had 4-wheel drive, but being an Alaskan outdoorsman with years of experience, I trusted him. We finally made it up to the top, which was flat and really open with a big area of forest in the opposite direction from the road we drove up. We set up our tents. We got everything set up. My friend and I decided to go exploring. We were about 50 yards from the tent when we heard a big crack as a tree branch snapped in the woods behind us. We got quiet and looked towards it, but we didn't see anything. We were thinking it was just a deer, so we just brushed it off. As we were walking, the noise came again, but we just kept going. We sat on a boulder looking down the steep wooded hill. It was overlooking the dirt road from where we had come from. We heard another cracking branch from behind. Whatever it was seemed to be following us. Our imagination started going wild. We came up with everything from a serial killer stalking us in the woods, to deer, to Bigfoot. When we got back to the campsite, we told her dad what we had heard and how it seemed to be following us. He kind of played it off as a black bear, and he started securing all the food. Later on, my friend confided in me that her dad had gotten out his pistol and was going to be sleeping with it. My friend and I were sharing one tent, and he was in his own, not far from us, so we just figured everything would be okay. In the middle of the night, something woke me up. I started hearing something, or somebody walking outside. As I lay down listening, I could hear it quietly circling the tent. It sounded like it was walking on 2 legs. I say this because it had a distinct pattern in how it was walking. Whatever it was, it sounded big as I could hear its weight, if that makes sense. I could even hear deep, quiet, heavy breathing at the same time. As I lay there listening, I could hear it moving to the other parts of the campsite and then back to our tent, almost like it was walking in a big, repetitive loop. This went on for who knows how long, but it felt like forever. Terrified and also unable to wake up my friend, I was just laying there, listening, until I fell asleep. The next morning, I told my friend and her dad about it. but I'm not sure if they believe me or not. Interesting though, nothing in the camp was disturbed. The ground was not very soft, and in some places it was covered by grass, so there were no footprints. This is something that I've never been able to explain, and to this day, it lingers in the back of my mind when camping. I do sometimes wonder what that thing was that walked around our tent all night. My mom told me to never trust something that arrives quietly at night, wearing the shape of our loved ones. I'll explain more of this at the end. Almost all of my friends have slowly left throughout the years. We're surrounded by woods, dirt roads, and there's only a few homes. I decided to stay behind and help with the family business. I am the oldest of 3, so maybe that'll explain a lot. We as a family have a small restaurant that serves locals who are coming home from work and travelers who end up passing through here. English is not my first language, so excuse any typos that I might have. Also, this happened a little south of the border, about 30 minutes when you cross. Before hitting a major city, you'll come across my town. One night, near closing time, while cleaning and locking everything up, there was a big white dog that was coming from down the road. His face was scarred, and he was so thin. It was obvious he hadn't eaten in days. He looked nervous, scared, but by showing him a plate of food, he got closer to me. I ended up giving him water and food. When he finished eating, he continued walking down the road, almost like he was a regular customer who does this. I didn't mind. We help just about anybody passing through, whether you're going up to the States or coming back. The next morning, when me and my family arrived to open the restaurant, he was there again, lying down in front of the door. My mom was like, "Look at this." And throughout the day, he would just look at every person who came in. I ended up feeding him again, realizing that I might now have a dog. I didn't have one. I've never been a fan of owning dogs. I know I won't have time for them, and I hate seeing animals tied up or abandoned. That evening, when business slowed down, and one of our regular customers came by, a taxi driver, Jose, very typical name. Jose would drive around our little town, sometimes go up to the border to pick up anybody who was coming back down. He always stopped by after his shift sometimes. Some days he would stop by twice. He stopped like 30 minutes before closing, and he just stayed outside in his car. He would do this in case he got called or something. I knew it was him because of the glass windows we had. I was getting ready to close when 2 young men were about to come in. I could tell they were not from the area, and they also appeared sweaty, dirty, like they had worked all day. But as they got close, the white dog started barking aggressively at them, refusing to let them inside basically. I had to go outside and feed him a steak so that he could stop trying to scare them off. I couldn't risk him biting somebody or driving customers away. The 2 men went inside while I dealt with the white dog. Once I came back in, I was like, "Sorry about that. Have a seat wherever you like." They went to go sit down, and then the dog came back and sat at the entrance, just watching, growling. Both of the young men looked at the menu. They seemed nervous, and they said they didn't have enough money to eat. I guess they saw the prices on the menu, and they said they were going to leave instead. Mind you, we are a small business, and all of our income is dependent on travelers passing through. So I just asked how much they had. I have never refused food to somebody who's hungry, but they ignored me and left, asking me on the way out if I could hold the dog. I did. I walked with them outside. As I was closing up, Jose, the taxi driver, asked if I realized what just happened. He explained that both young men had some large machetes inside their jeans on the side, hidden underneath their clothes, and they were holding them. They were planning to rob us, but I think they didn't do anything because of him pointing to the dog. And when I got into my truck to head home, the white dog jumped into the truck bed without asking. I guess I do have a dog now. I ended up naming him Chavo after the Spanish TV show. Chavo became part of the restaurant's routine. Every day he came with me to work. He stood at the entrance, greeting everybody, growling at certain people, and he would come back home with me at night. Life was good with my new friend. Days turned into months, and months turned into years. Chavo was getting old. I'm not sure how old he was, but he looked tired. It was to the point where he struggled to jump into the truck, so I ended up building him a small ramp. Over time, Chavo stopped being just my dog, and he became part of the restaurant family itself. Even regular customers grew fond of him, and they greeted him before they even greeted me. Some would bring him food, or insist on buying him a full meal, saying that he deserved it just as much as anybody inside. A few gave him nicknames, and others asked me if I would consider selling him, or letting them adopt him. I would always refuse. As a joke that slowly became tradition, we even added a plate to the menu named after him, the Chavo Special, which happened to be his favorite meal. It also became one of our best-selling plates. One day, after lunch hour, it got sort of quiet, and I figured I could go feed him right now. I sat next to him. I cut up a breakfast steak, and I started feeding it to him. Like I said, I'm not sure how old he was, but he was struggling with a lot of things. Mind you, I also ended up eating my lunch with him. As we finished, I went inside. When I did, I saw Chavo get up and start walking down the road. I assumed he was just making a lap or something, like he used to. I assumed he would come back, but he didn't. I waited for him all night. I went around looking for him. One time I even slept outside the restaurant in my truck to see if he showed up. He never came back. About a week later, just as I was closing for the night, I saw him again. Chavo was sitting in front of the restaurant. I got excited. I went outside and gave him a big ass hug. I started speaking to him, but he was acting different. He didn't get close to me. I mean, he did, but he would try to back away. It was like he was creeped out, almost like he wanted to say something. I got in my truck and he jumped into the bed. I was happy. I ended up driving home. When we got there, he jumped down immediately and sniffed around the yard, almost like everything was new to him, and he went inside his doghouse. From inside, he would just stare at me. I could only see his eyes in the dark. I thought I would take him to the vet the next day, just to make sure there was nothing wrong with him. That night, something woke me up. At first I thought I heard Chavo barking in a dream. When I opened my eyes, I heard what sounded like somebody trying to force the window open. That didn't make sense. Chavo was outside, and I know he wouldn't allow anyone near the house. I grabbed the knife that I had, and I looked out the window by moving the curtain. When I did, standing directly behind it, facing me, was Chavo, standing on his hind legs, watching me, almost like waiting for me to say something. He dropped down onto all fours and lay down in front of his doghouse. I didn't even sleep that night. He actually scared me, so I was definitely gonna take him to the vet tomorrow. When I woke up the next morning, Chavo was gone. I looked everywhere, but I couldn't find him. Now I'm getting creeped out. Maybe he walked to the restaurant. When I got there in the morning, he wasn't there. He didn't show up to work the whole day. Maybe he called in, but it wasn't like him. That evening, as I was closing up again, Jose, the taxi driver, got there. He asked if I had found Chavo. Confused, I asked how he knew the dog was missing. He said he saw Chavo near the bridge outside town. About a week ago, he stopped to call out to him, but Chavo didn't turn around. Instead, he continued walking into the woods. This next part, it made sense what Jose told me. He said that dogs like Chavo don't want their owners to suffer and watch them die, so they leave, so that you don't have to go through the process of seeing them pass away. Jose told me that I need to go look for him, so I told my mom that I was leaving a bit earlier, and I drove down to the bridge outside town. Right there from the bridge, I saw the tree line, the entrance to the woods. When I got close, I found Chavo there. He was laying down, almost like he was resting. He had been dead for at least a week, likely since the day he disappeared. I felt sad. He had been dead for a while now. But if he was, then who did I bring home with me? My mother prayed and warned me to never trust something that arrives quietly at night, especially wearing the shape of our loved ones or our animals. When somebody that you love dies, especially an animal that protected you, it leaves a space. And there's things out there that notice that space, and they come looking, wearing what you trust, hoping that you open the door without thinking. Whatever this thing was, an evil spirit, a trickster, it knows that you know. Something that looked like Chavo, my best friend, had came to the restaurant, followed me home, and tried entering my home after he was already dead. Anyways, I left Chavo where he chose to rest. He picked that spot, and I scattered flower seeds all over him. They ended up growing, and now, every time that I pass that bridge going home, I can see Chavo's flowers blooming from a distance. Rest in peace, Chavo. I'll see you soon. I should write a book about my paramedic days. And I had a call on a very desolated stretch of road for a car sitting in the middle of the road, covered in blood. Of course, it has to happen at 2 a.m., just like every other scary story. We arrived on scene and find a new Camaro sitting in the middle of the road that had obviously been in some sort of accident. The problem is that there is absolutely nothing around the car. No persons, no other vehicle, nothing. Part of my job then was a tactical paramedic for the sheriff's office. Sounds a lot exciting and high speed, low drag. But nope, not as a medic. I got paid to wait for stuff to happen and sit in the rear with the gear. That being said, my paramedic partner and I both had pistols in the ambulance. As we started approaching the Camaro, my partner is shining a light around when he says really low, get back, now, he says. I shine my light in the car, and there's intestines wrapped around the gear shifter and a lung in the back seat. So we kind of freak out. We call dispatch, let them know what's happening, and we're all in the process of getting out of there when the police show up. However, that's when we see a figure appear walking down the road towards us. As he gets closer, we see that he's covered in blood and gore. We both put on our vests, helmets, snatch our pistols, as I sound like a scared Home Alone 9-year-old on the radio to dispatch. We approach and start screaming at him to get down on the ground, which he does. After everyone's heart rate is below 200, we start talking and figure out what happened. The guy had bought a brand new Camaro and drove it up this road to open it up. He said 1 minute he is shifting gears, and the next thing he knows, his car is all over the road, and his mouth was full of blood, and it seemed like an explosion went off. I started looking at his injuries over, and I can't really see anything major. And then I asked him about the passenger in his car. He's like, passenger? Which one? My partner says, there's a lung in your back seat. The dude goes straight into mental overload, and he can't come up with anything, so I'm starting to think that he's hurt. We get him in the ambulance. Police are 5 minutes away. We possibly have another victim out here. and so I have to go look by myself. I went through the crash. I look in the car and sure enough, intestines wrapped around the gear shifter, lung in the back seat. Looks like parts of a liver. Looks like a hand grenade went off inside the car. I walk around the other side and I see a faint blood smear stain on the road. I walk to it, and that's when I see something else further down the road. So I keep walking to it. I finally see something on the side of the road and run up to it. To be honest, it completely freaked me out, and it scared me to death about the body that I was about to see. And this dude, the driver, he hit a fucking deer. State police estimated that he was going over 100. That's when the deer jumped into his car's pathway, and it hit the top corner of the windshield with its stomach. When the windshield crashed, it caused a negative vacuum in the car, sucking almost all of the deer's organs out and into his car and all over him. I did have the fire department decontaminate him. I wrapped him in some blankets and took him to the hospital. I was introduced to the world of woodworking at a young age. Of course, by my own father, a master of his craft. As a young boy, I watched my father's skilled hands transform rough timbers of wood into works of art, each piece bearing the imprint of his passion and expertise. Together, we would spend countless hours in the workshop surrounded by the tools of our trade and inspired by the possibilities that lay within each piece of wood. From the simple joys of carving a small piece of wood into something artistic, into wood carving big designs. My dad passed away a few years later and had left his workshop for me. My mom told me that my dad always had a passion for me to follow in his footsteps. Decades went by, and I grew up working on side projects as a hobby, selling them on Craigslist, Marketplace, Etsy, and even building custom stuff for the community. There was nothing like being in a workshop and building something from scratch with your own bare hands. I received a request from a local library that they had old furniture they were trying to restore and set up for viewing. I went over and looked at the furniture they wanted me to bring to life, and I knew I could do it. I was just missing some detail shaper tools that had finally given up on me. I found some replacements, but they weren't going to get here until a month later. I knew I couldn't wait this long. I asked a friend of mine if he knew anyone who had access to some of the tools that I needed. He said he knows a guy from work that would be happy to help. And apparently, he was interested in the same stuff that I was. But he did warn me that he's a little bit off. One morning, I drove my friend to work, so he introduced me to the guy. He seems pretty distant and withdrawn from all the others. He shakes my hand, and we end up talking a little bit. He does seem really interested in the woodwork that I was doing, and we talked about different projects and such for a little while, talking about things we learned and the tools that we used. The guy warms up after a bit, and I ask him if it would be alright if I checked out some of his stuff. He kind of agrees, but it's one of those responses when somebody is trying to come up with an excuse, but they just can't. He tells me to swing by that night. He says we can talk over a few beers. That sounds good to me. But later that night, I get a call. It's the guy. He sounds very shaken up. He says things are crazy at home, and right now it's in a good time. There is a lot of noise in the background, and so he says that he will call me when things calm down. He didn't call me the next day, nor the day after. It's not until I was ready to return the tool that I had borrowed that he calls one afternoon. He says that things have settled down for now, and that he wants me to bring over some of my own work as well, to compare and all that stuff. He gives me his address and I say sure, and I start to head over. I quickly notice that this guy lives in the middle of nowhere. I had to call him up a few times just to find the house, because it was nothing but narrow backcountry dirt roads. The house was at the end of a very long driveway, and you go from dirt trails to beautiful acres of land. The driveway is littered with trees, and his house is actually pretty nice. As I come up the driveway, something strikes me as strange about the trees that I'm passing up. They all have faces carved into them, facing the driveway, twisted, painful looking expressions. I didn't think too much of it, because sometimes I make morbid stuff myself. And in fact, I was quite impressed. I mean, I have all types of scary stuff in my house. However, the amount of detail was staggering. Looking out into the tree line of the property, every tree had a painted face looking into the house, almost like the woods were watching you wherever you were. This kind of creeped me out. Looking out was like seeing 100 or so white faces, just crying out in pain, kind of like they wanted your attention. I knock on the door. The guy answers with a beer in hand. He's actually much friendlier than before. He helps me carry some of my stuff in and shows me around. He seems pretty cool. I begin to notice that each room has one of those down faces hanging above the door frame. The more I saw them, the more I began to feel creeped out. Not only was I in the middle of nowhere, but something just felt off. Up close, the faces were more detailed than I had imagined. I asked him what his focus on the faces were for, and the guy kinda tensed up and dodged my question. Upon entering the workshop, which was super sweet by the way, he seemed to have an interest besides creepy faces. He had entire 7-foot sculptures of women, men, animals, all of them very well done. And there's another large one in the back of his workshop that has a tarp over it. He looks at me, almost with a worried look, and says that that one isn't done yet. But the way he says it makes me not want to press further. It was right in front of a door that I think led to another room. We began working on stuff together, trading stories and fun times about when we injured ourselves. Suddenly, out of nowhere, he changes the subject. The guy starts to ask me what I think about God and the afterlife. I tell him that I'm not super religious, but I don't rule anything out. I just don't go to church or anything. The guy gets a bit flustered by this, gets a bit loud. He says that he was told that everything was a lie. So I ask him, by who? He's kind of silent for a moment, and then he asked me if I believe in spirits. I gave him the same kind of answer. It's possible. I don't rule anything out. He then starts looking around the room as if seeing if anyone is around. Then he leans towards me, and his voice goes soft, and he whispers. I see things in the woods at dusk. I can see their shadows. Sometimes they whisper from the trees, and I can hear them. I start to think that this guy is obviously mentally disturbed, given everything else, but I continue listening. I try to ask him what they tell him. They tell him that everything is a lie, that God is a lie, the afterlife is a lie. The only thing after dying is darkness. He says that they laugh at him, and that they leave dead animals at his tree line. At this point, I'm officially freaked out. He says sometimes they visit him at night, and each face carving represents a different spirit that has came to visit him. He says that they can't stand looking at themselves in death, so they don't step within the tree line, which is why he has the entire thing carved out. I'm pretty quiet at this point. I hadn't felt goosebumps like this ever since I was a kid, and I had chills running up my spine. He told me that they try to talk to him from the tree line at night, that they try to get him to leave his home. I try to change the subject, but the guy looks down and just keeps talking. He starts to get pale as a sheet, and from what I can tell, he's actually terrified. He even kind of starts looking at me with tears in his eyes. He tells me that I'm the only person he's told. Knowing that I'm a stranger, he apologizes. He says that he's scared and doesn't know what to do anymore. I try my best to awkwardly console this stranger, and the guy kind of starts to break down. Personally, I think he needs help, but I know it's not my place to try to help him, and so I regret to this day the next thing I ask, why he's so afraid. He looks at me and says that the faces are not working anymore. 2 weeks ago, he had something terrible in his living room. I asked him what it was. He walks over to the figure that's covered with the tarp and pulls it off, and he reveals the most mangled, terrible thing I have ever seen. It barely resembles a human being. Shortly after this, there's a loud bang on the wall to my right. I nearly jumped out of my skin, but the guy didn't even look. Then again, another bang, and then it just continued on and on. The guy then screams towards where the noise is coming from. Stop it. And it ceases. After that, I just grab my stuff. I tell the guy that I'm sorry and that I have to get out of here. I fucking got out of there as quickly as possible. As I'm leaving his home and driveway, I look in the rearview mirror, and the trees are darker than I ever seen. They have shadows all around them. I end up making it back home, and the guy calls me a week later and apologizes. He said he was just being silly, and everything is okay now, and that most of it was just a joke. However, I told our mutual friend what happened, and he told me that the guy actually quit, and that nobody has heard from him, nor could they get a hold of him after that. This is something that happened to me a few decades ago. It's been such a long time, but I like to share this experience with everybody who likes to go hiking, or walking, or camping in the Appalachian Trail. Way back when I was in my mid-20s, in the late 1980s, I used to be hardcore into hiking and camping, but given that my home state of Rhode Island is like the size of a postage stamp, I exhausted a lot of the more local campgrounds pretty quickly and began to long for something a little bit more on the wild side. I heard a lot of great things about the Appalachian Trail. Hiking it was a badge of honor for a lot of people who shared my passion for the outdoors. My uncle on my dad's side had hiked the whole thing over the course of a summer back in the 50s, and he would never shut up about it whenever he would see me. He made it sound amazing, like there was true wilderness out there, just waiting to be explored. So I made up my mind to mimic the journey that my uncle took over one summer. I couldn't get the time off work to walk the whole trail, but if I timed it correctly, I could walk the southern portion of the trail from Harper's Ferry to Asheville, North Carolina in just a couple of weeks, fulfilling a hiking dream that I had for what seemed like an age. Then, in the summer of 1989, I traveled down to Harper's Ferry by bus and by train with all my hiking and camping gear on my back. After picking up a few final supplies for my journey south, I hiked up onto the Appalachian Trail and kicked off the journey of a lifetime. Needless to say, the first few days of walking were pretty tough, but I got used to the level of strain pretty quickly. I'm telling you, I've never been as hungry or tired as I was on those first few nights up in Appalachia. I brought a hammock with me as I heard some pretty intense stories about the bugs down in West Virginia. Nasty little bugs with the names like the assassin bug, which basically has a big spike for a mouth, or the cow killer ants, whose stings are so painful that they are said to have taken down an actual cow. This had to be pure rumor, but it was intimidating. So every night after my day's hike, I would take it out of my pack, unroll it, and tie it up between two trees before getting some shut-eye. It didn't make for the comfiest night's sleep I ever had, but I wasn't complaining, especially if I was able to keep the black widows off of me. But since I was out in the woods most nights, without cover, every little sound or squawk from the nightly animals would wake me up. It was irritating, sure, but it was part of being out there, bonding with nature, you can say. So this one night, I wake up pretty sure that I heard something rustling in the leaves close by. I shifted my hammock, peering over my shoulder, and then I felt my blood run cold as I saw this big dark shape looming over me. I froze for a second, feeling my eyes adjust to the darkness. Then I could tell that it was a person, just standing there, staring at me. In one fluid motion, I rolled out of my hammock and hit the ground, running, bolting off into the trees. I didn't care who it was standing over me, Whoever does that kind of creepy shit did not have the best intentions, and I wasn't about to stick around to make small talk. I ran a safe distance into the woods, caught my breath, circled around, and then I started to sneak back towards my camp. My intention was to make sure it was clear before gathering up my stuff and moving on to a safer spot. I took it slowly, scanning the darkness for any sign of the shadowy figure, eventually finding my way back to camp, only to discover it was completely untouched, with all my gear still in the same spots. I had this horrible feeling in my gut that whoever had been standing over me just backed off to watch from a distance and was gonna wait for me to come back and get my stuff before trying to ambush me. If they weren't there to steal from me, it was obvious something else they wanted, and I was dreading to think exactly what that was. But regardless, I managed to grab my stuff and get out of the area without anyone managing to sneak up on me. The next few days, I walked hard and fast, exhausting myself in my attempt to get as far away from the area as possible. After that, I figured I was safe. No one had bothered me during the previous few days of hiking, so I figured I would be okay from there on out. But I was wrong. Very wrong. Every single night since that incident, I struggled to get some sleep. I kept picturing that person standing over me, just staring down at me in the darkness. I had no idea how long they'd been there, or what they had in mind for me, and I was just glad that I got out of the area. But still, I didn't start to feel safe again until I bought some fishing line from a sporting goods store in one of the small towns I had passed, which I could then use to make tripwires that ran between the trees close to where I was camping. Then, a couple of empty cans of beans that I would string together, and whoever snagged their foot on the wire would make the cans clink together, making me aware of their presence. I had one big scare when a fox snagged the line, and I rolled out of my hammock with a knife in hand, ready to take on whoever was about to creep up on me, only to see the furry little guy scurrying away into the moonlight. I did end up laughing to myself about that one, and after that, I stopped sleeping with my knife in hand, because all it was gonna take was one little slip, and I would be in a whole world of trouble. About a week went by, and I had just about gotten over the whole shadowy figure in the night incident. I had to be almost 100 miles away from where it took place, and I had no more trouble on any other night, except for the incident with the fantastic Mr. Fox that just scared the life out of me. So with the help of my little tripwire alert device, I was able to start getting some sleep again without any trouble. However, that night, I woke up suddenly to find that I couldn't move. I couldn't bring my arms up from my sides at all, and the hammock material seemed to be pushed right into my face. I was cocooned by it, like the fabrics was wrapped around my entire body. This only registered in my half-awake brain when I heard the sound of fabric snapping. Then, I hit the dirt, completely knocking the wind out of me. I had no idea what was going on, struggling to break out of the hammock, only I couldn't. That's when I felt the hammock being dragged across the forest floor. Then, it hit me. Whoever was dragging me across the ground had bundled me up in my own hammock with some kind of cord. They had cut the ropes tying me to the tree and was proceeding to drag me off to God knows where. I started screaming at the very top of my lungs, forever it seemed like, to let me out. But no one responded. All I could hear was the sound of the hammock's fabric rustling against the forest floor. I knew I had to think fast, or whatever was going on wasn't gonna end well at all. Like I said, I had stopped sleeping with my knife in my hand, or nearby me in the hammock, because that was just an accident waiting to happen. So I had nothing handy to cut through the material and make my escape, or so I thought. In a split second, one idea popped up. A few years back, my dad had gifted his old wristwatch to me. It was a reliable thing, but I had just one complaint about it. The little latch that kept it tied to my wrist, and was actually a little sharp from the years of use. I managed to accidentally poke myself a few times within the process of picking it up, or even putting it on. It actually drew blood, so I knew what I had to do. I unbuckled the watch as quickly as I could, which wasn't easy considering I was getting dragged along the ground in the pitch darkness, and managing to pinch the sharp clasp between my thumb and index finger was even harder. But still, I managed, and when I did, I began to rake it against the fabric of the hammock. It was just as effective at cutting canvas as it was at cutting skin, and even though it took a good few tries, it didn't take long until I could see the subtle glow of the silvery moonlight from the other side. I kept cutting as quickly and quietly as I could, until there were so many cuts that I could rip myself out of this cocoon, like some terrified newborn bursting out of the womb. You'll have to excuse the analogy, but in retrospect, that's exactly what it seemed like happened. I was born again that night. I got a second chance at living. Escaping the hammock meant life because I know that staying in it would have meant death. For the second time in about 10 days, I found myself bounding through the dark woods. Only that second time, the fear I had was like 10 times what I felt the first time around. I don't even know how I managed to escape, assuming it was the same figure standing over me the first night. They had somehow managed to track me for more than 100 miles, and they even seemed to get past my tripwires. They were a far better woodsman than me, most likely more physically fit than me. I just know that by the time I reached the house with its lights on, I turned to look behind me as I was banging on the door. There was no one else around, and the family who lived there were kind enough to put me up for the night. After I called the local sheriff, who came out in the morning to help me retrace my steps through the woods. We found my camp, but not the hammock. And even though I told him everything in detail, I could tell he was very skeptical of my story. He even suggested that I most likely got lost and scared in the dark and had just ended up jumping at shadows. Maybe even had a bad dream that seemed a little too vivid because of the lack of proper rest. But I know this was real, just in the way my palms are sweating right now as I'm recounting this. I'm sure that night really did happen the way I remember it. I never did finish that dream hike. The next day, I got on a bus back to Harper's Ferry, then took the train all the way back to Providence, and I only ever told a handful of people who happened to be out on the trails. I figured not many would really believe me. They would just think I was telling a campfire tale or something. I didn't tell my hiking uncle for the longest time. I thought that maybe he was just gonna laugh, or tell me that I didn't have it in me to do something that tough. But when I finally told him my story, I got a reaction that I definitely wasn't expecting. He just nodded, and he told me that there were some nights that he himself didn't think that he would make it out alive. He said that there are people who live up in those mountains, who have been outlaws for generations, who live isolated, outside of the natural order of things. He had some pretty close calls himself at times, bumping into people who weren't nearly as friendly as the majority of West Virginians, and sometimes even seeing things that he knew he wasn't supposed to see. But just what those things were, he didn't seem to want to say. I always told myself that I would try my little Appalachian adventure some other time. Maybe when I'm a little bit more old, a little more wise. The trail will still be there, waiting for me. But then again, so will whoever try to drag me off that night. Growing up, I always had a thing for walking alone in the woods. I was a creative writer in school. My attention span now is far too gone to finish much writing these days. But back then, I would take a stroll through the woods to get my writing done. Just me, a pencil, and a notebook. Sometimes I would even listen to Silent Hill and Parasite Eve soundtracks. Some of those soundtracks were pretty creepy too, yet it never creeped me out being alone in the woods listening to creepy music. I never did feel afraid. The single experience, however, has left me with the feeling of dread at the mere thought of going back into the woods alone. I still venture out there, but that peace of mind I used to have just isn't there anymore. I work at a call center, have weekends off, and I was single at the time with not too many friends. I would spend my weekends hiking and camping along the Appalachian Trail. I lived only 2 hours from it, and the drive itself was usually quite relaxing too. Hiking and camping alone can be difficult, and it's not something I would recommend for inexperienced hikers. Even if you follow forecasts, the weather can switch upon you when you least expect. The rare large animal encounter can happen, and sometimes you can put yourself in a very dangerous situation when you got no one with you. I sprained my ankle once on a trail in the nearby mountains. I was miles deep, and having gone in alone, I had to trek back, limping all the way. Not a fun experience at all. On a cloudy Saturday morning, I woke up early and ventured forth to the Appalachian Trail. After a couple of hours of a drive, I finally arrived. No rain at all just yet. Even though the sky would remain overcast for my journey, I had planned on a one-night camping trip, not going too deep. I had some plans the following day for my sister's baby shower, and I didn't plan on missing it. The hiking was fairly smooth. The air that day was just the right pressure and not too humid. It was an especially comfortable hike. I never would have expected what was going to transpire. I hunkered down under a poplar tree, tearing down a Cliff Bar, then finished off my first bottle of water. I looked around as I enjoyed my meal, trying to remember the names of the numerous different trees and shrubs around me. Then I thought about a meeting I would have to come in early for on Tuesday. It was around then that I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. I saw a human figure at the top of a dead tree about 20 yards to my right. It was small. I could very clearly make out a small coat, pants, shoes, and hair. What in the world? I wondered. My heart raced as I picked myself up and ran over towards the tree. Surely I wasn't seeing a child stuck at the very tip top of a tree in the Appalachian Trail, right? It was the most bizarre thing. I definitely panicked, to be honest. If this child fell from that height, they could be hurt. If they weren't already, that is. I mean, the figure wasn't moving at all except for their clothes blowing in the wind. "Hey, you okay?" I called up. No response, and there was no movement. I gulped, my heart sinking a little further. You might be thinking I should have called for help then, but I had a habit of leaving my phone in the car. I don't like looking at my screen too often, so on short hikes I like to leave it behind. I was only going to be out overnight, so I thought I wouldn't need it. I made a quick decision and I began to climb. I was in decent shape, sure, but I hadn't climbed a tree since I was 12 or 13? Lucky for me, this tree was nearly perfect for climbing branches all in the right places. It was only recently dead too, so none of it felt brittle yet. I had to stop several times, but eventually, exhausted, I made it close enough to the figure to reach out and touch their shoe. I poked the bottom of one of their shoes, trying to get their attention or get a response. The shoe fell the moment my finger touched it. Underneath, there was no sock, no foot. I looked closer at the rest of the figure. There was no person inside the clothes. The coat and pants were empty, and the hair, well, that was especially weird. I reached up, nearly losing my hold on the tree, and inside the hood of the coat was in fact very real human hair, long and straight like it belonged to a young girl. But the strand I pulled wasn't attached to anything. I could see flakes of skin on the end of the strands, as if the hair had been yanked from someone's head. I felt vomit rising from my stomach before I could react further. And then I heard something below me. Footsteps, slow and heavy. Then there was a whisper, just a bit louder than the wind itself. The voice sounded feminine, but somehow it sounded closer to me, as if the speaker was on a nearby branch. "Come down." It came again suddenly after about 10 minutes of silence. I was at my limit. Then I tried resting myself on the branch below me, but it was too thin, forcing me to press my feet and legs onto it to keep my back steady against the trunk. There was no position in which I could rest. I had to get down. "Come down." Again, I heard the whisper. The footsteps came again too. They seemed to be just below me at the bottom of the tree. But when I looked, I saw no one. I climbed down to the next branch with my legs still wobbling. I was confident I could jump down without being hurt. I inhaled. I remember thinking, just go, and jumping at the same time. I hit the ground, with both of my knees popping, but I knew I was fine, and I started running as quickly as I could down the trail the way I came. I didn't even look back. I have no idea how I was even allowed to leave. Whatever I had encountered out there felt so evil, but I ran until I saw another person whose expression was one of confusion. I smiled and just continued past them. Back at my car, I called the ranger station with my phone, which had been waiting for me in the glove compartment. I reported what I found and where I found it. I couldn't help but think that maybe I should have ran instead of climbing that tree. But the idea of this poor child falling from it while I was gone, trying to find them help, was just eating at me. Now, knowing there was no child, I felt as if I had been baited. Some part of me was telling me something had laid a trap for me. Then again, why was I allowed to leave? That was the last of it. I never heard back from anyone about this encounter. I never even heard of a similar experience, and I see no news reports about a missing child. In the end, a fear of the woods now lingers with me, and I'll be staying far away from the Appalachian Trail for the time being. My name is Tommy. I'm from a small town called Farmington in New Mexico. I live right next to the Navajo REZ, near the area where they filmed Skinwalker Canyon on Ghost Adventures. The story I'm telling happened in the summer of 2014. I have many stories and a picture of a footprint from what I believe to be a child skinwalker. One night, me and my friends, Robert, Angelina, and Richard snuck out. We were just kids and didn't really know what we were doing. Robert, Angelina, and Richard were siblings. All four of us left to our friend's house about 2 a.m. It was a normal night. The insects were out for night hunting. Crickets were chirping, and the shooting stars were in the sky. We went to their window. Ryan, the older brother, answered. We ended up taking Ryan and Laurel, 'cause Aaron was too tired to go anywhere. So we left. It was just me, Angelina, Richard, Robert, Ryan, and Laurel. We trekked back to our neighborhood. Angelina, being a girly girl, wanted to get on the internet, so we stopped outside one of our other friends' house. It was 2 in the morning, but we just needed to sit on the road to get a connection. We ended up going to this place to smoke some weed. It was an old abandoned junkyard that was in our neighborhood. We went down the long back road to reach the junkyard. There was 2 big storage containers. One of them had a chain and a lock. The other was open freely. We chose to hunker down in there and to smoke. So we were just smoking and talking like your average teenager does. While we were in there, nothing happened. But it was a whole different story when we left back to our roads. We went back to our friends for internet after we smoked. Angelina was sitting on the pavement part of the driveway. The rest were dirt roads. That's when my friend Robert screamed, "Did you fucking see that? It just went across the fucking road." I didn't see anything being that it was dark. The only light source was the half moon reflecting in my shiny shoes. But then, that's when I saw it. It was crouched down, almost looking like an alien. It had crawled back onto the dirt road, and it was staring at all of us. Deep, yellow eyes. The body also seemed to be glowing as well, but I'm not sure if it was the moon causing a difference in color. It then started crawling towards us, and then it just stopped, backed up, and disappeared into the field next to the junkyard. We all then started running back to Ryan's house, and the next night, we were being the wannabe courageous stupid teens. and said that we were going to hunt this thing. Me, Richard, and Robert got some pellet guns, screwdrivers, and other steel weapons and went back to where we saw it. As we were approaching the street light, I smelled a horrible scent. I gagged. Richard, being a weirdo, said, "It's a fucking dead body." And so then we started calling it out. "Skinwalker, come out." I then called it a skinwalker bitch and we all started running away. We ran down a few blocks and started walking. And as we came across some neighbors' chickens, they started freaking out. They started clucking and they were so loud. But then, everything got silent. No bugs. Just the air. We all got creeped out and we ended up going back home. The next morning we went to tell Richard and Robert's father about what happened. He was a medicine man, and he yelled at us for calling out to the thing. He blessed everyone and told us to be mindful of any words that come out of us, and to watch our feet and where they take us. These incidents occurred over a period of time when I was younger. However, it was only until recently that I connected the dots. I grew up in Louisiana, right on the outskirts of New Orleans. The city itself has so much history, stories and intrigue surrounding it, that I would be remiss to say that I didn't have other experiences involving spirits and all that, but that's a story for another time. Right after Hurricane Katrina, I was displaced by the storm and ended up staying in Florida for a little while. While there, it seemed as though every channel on the news had coverage on the horrific event. People's houses were flooded, the roads were blocked, businesses were destroyed, and to make things even worse, there were many reports of people committing some serious crimes. Part of the news covered people trying to escape the storm and the resulting aftermath, and the other half seemed to cover the dark side of humanity, vandalism, theft, looting, violence. All of that occurred while others were simply trying to survive. To make matters worse, the prisons were destroyed, and a lot of the city's unmentionables started roaming the area, causing more trouble for the people who were trying to survive. Some really, really horrible stuff went on. Like, sure, this experience involved the aftermath of a horrible storm and the possible encounter with a dangerous cryptid, but I'll never put it past humans to be the darkest, most cruel creatures in existence. The news covered up a lot of it. Of course, this is where people began to say, then how do you know what really happened if there was a cover-up? And to you, I'll say this. I was there, in the Superdome. I hid from the prisoners when they broke in, and I, being one of the able-bodied people in the area, was able to help deal with the people who weren't as fortunate and being able to hide. Coverage about the swamps flooding, animals escaping the zoo, as well as creatures like the alligators and such, made their way into the same broken streets as the ones where people simply trying to get back to their homes. The news covered this as well. It seemed as though all manners of beasts were displaced from the storm. Not just us humans, but what about the things that we are told don't exist? Is it possible that the storm impacted them as well? A few months after the storm, I eventually moved back to Louisiana and tried to put back the pieces of my life. I lost a dear friend to people who were looting. My house was in shambles, and the majority of my classmates were off in different cities. Thankfully, I started dating my now wife, who is from Florida. We would take turns visiting each other every other weekend. It was a long-distance thing, but we made it work. This is relevant to the story. Just trust me. One week, as I was driving my sister home from the movies, we started talking about lions. She was 13 at the time, and she had just got out from seeing the Narnia movie with her friends. We crossed a small bridge that led into our subdivision. As we turned to the corner, she said something along the lines of, "And Mr. Tumnus started to play the flute." "What's a Tumnus again?" I asked. He is this goat man thing. She saw my confused face and continued. He's got like the legs of a goat. However, he has horns and doesn't have any hair on his body. Like Phil, you know, from Hercule. She paused mid-sentence. Ew, did Ashley get a new dog or something? And motioned towards our neighbor's yard. I glanced to the left and saw what looked like a grayish dog, sort of like a greyhound, sitting in their front lawn. But something about it didn't feel right. It was skinny. Like, a little too skinny. Its muzzle looked too flat, and its legs were longer than I thought they should be. But I wasn't an expert in dogs, so I didn't think much of it at the time. Not sure, I said as we drove past their house. But I'll ask her later. We drove off with it looking in the direction of my car, almost as if it were following us with its eyes. But I mean, that's what animals do, and casted it off as nothing. In passing, I texted Ashley, asking about her new creepy puppy, but she had no idea what I was talking about. She said it was most likely some stray that got a whiff of her dog's. Poor thing was probably malnourished, if it was as thin as you described, she said. I just wrote it off as whatever, and forgot all about it. A few weeks later, I was on the phone with my girlfriend, just talking about our respective days at school. As I walked into the kitchen to grab a Coke, Robin, my sister, was browsing her friend's MySpace page and listening to Lil Wayne on Pandora. As soon as I walked into the kitchen, I could barely hear what my girlfriend was saying, so I asked Robin if she would lower the music. I grabbed my Coke, a whole bag of chips, and was making my way back upstairs when I heard Robin call to me, Kuya, what's that? As a side note, Kuya, in Tagalog, means elder brother. She squeaked as I rounded the steps. What do you mean? I heard something from outside. I groaned. I told my girlfriend to hold on a moment, as I went back down into the kitchen to see Robin peeking out through the blinds. Ew, that dog is back, she said, closing up the laptop and heading towards the stairs. I'll be in my room. That thing really gives me the creeps. Sure enough, it was there, sitting at the edge of our property, trying to sound tough. I told my girlfriend I was going to go outside to scare off the dog, and that I would call her off. In reality, I wanted to see the thing up close, and actually bring it some food if it wasn't aggressive. However, if it was dangerous, I didn't want her to hear me scream like a baby. So I opened the sliding glass door that led towards my backyard, and proceeded to walk over to where Robin saw the dog sitting. Now, to get an understanding of our backyard, it had a cement patio that connected to the grass, and at the very end of the yard was a canal. We had cement bases for a fence, but due to the hurricane all work stopped there. As I approached closer, its silhouette started to make me feel uncomfortable. It did that thing with its eyes that nocturnal animals do when they reflect light, you know, making it look even more creepy. I took a deep breath and was about to let out a, "Hey boy, you hungry?" But before those words could leave my mouth, it quickly jolted up and turned its head back towards the canal. For some reason, this caused me to freeze. I mean, the way it moved was off. It let out this moan, or maybe it was a growl. It sounded like the combination between a dog howling and a screaming goat, but more in sync, if that makes sense. I saw its eyes flash that eerie glow again, as it spun its body around and darted down towards the canal. It was creepy, sure, but once more I wrote it off as whatever. Another week or so, one of Ashley's dogs was found dead in her backyard. Now, I didn't see it myself, but from the way she described it, the poor thing was torn to shreds, with pieces of its fur scattered all over. The general consensus was that a bobcat or some other wildcat, but she wasn't convinced. Jackus was a mastiff, she kept repeating. There was no way some bobcat got to him like that. Now I know what you're thinking. It's most likely related to this thing, right? It was outside of her house that one night too. I mean, the thought crossed my mind, but I didn't want to bring it up around her. And later that same day, I was sitting on my roof. I would crawl out of my window from the second story and recline on the rooftop that hung over the garage, giving me a good view of my neighborhood. and telling my girlfriend about all that has happened so far. How I kept hearing strange sounds at night, and about how Jackass was found dead. I was in the middle of telling her how these sounds have been increasing in occurrence these past few days. When I heard it again, it sounded louder and much closer. Before I could ask my girlfriend if she heard it as well, she asked, "What the hell was that?" confirming that she also heard it. I then proceeded to tell her my theory on how it was connected to the creepy dog. When the weekend came and my girlfriend was in town to visit, I took her and my sister out to dinner. It was a nice meal: steak, potatoes, soda. The latter isn't important because none of us had any alcohol during this meal. On the drive home, we were discussing religion and faith when Robin screamed, "What the fuck?" pointing to the roof of a nearby neighbor's house. In my shock, I slammed on the brakes to get a better look. That's when we saw it. Like, really saw it. It was slender, and its limbs were outstretched. The joints were bent in some unnatural posture. It had pale gray fur. No, it wasn't fur. It was skin. Its skin was pale gray, and it was stretching extremely tight over its body. It was extremely unnerving to look at it. I sat there, foot on the brake, as I tried to make sense of what it was. That's when my sister screamed, "I want to go home," and the creature froze. Wait, I thought, did it hear us? There's no way it could hear us. The creature twitched, turning back to face us, once again hitting me with the eerie glow of its eyes, and then it skittered, like the way a lizard does, body close to the surface, over the other side of the roof, towards their backyard. I quickly called my neighbor soon as we got home and told him that we saw something on his roof. Attempting to not sound crazy, I said it looked like he had a huge possum crawling around the second story. His reply, "The wife and I have been seeing this monkey-looking thing hanging in the trees at night. We called animal control, and they said it was most likely a possum who had escaped from a preserve. But I know what a possum looks like, and that thing ain't no possum." I was more than a little confused, I guess. I mean, it looked like a long, skinny dog or something. We just saw it crack. Don't you worry though, it just sits there staring at nothing. I figure if it means any harm, it would have done so already. I guess, I said. Well, I just wanted to let you know, it's kind of weird looking. Well, if it comes in here, I'll knock it dead and mount it to my wall. He laughed. And that was the end of it. Jumping ahead here a few weeks ago, early 2020, my wife, the girlfriend from the story, and I ended up moving to Florida, became parents, and were living the good life when my sister and parents came to visit us for the weekend. When the grandparents were enjoying putting our daughter to sleep, Robin suggested looking for creepy videos on YouTube. We're horror fanatics, so why not, right? We came across a few scary story channels, and when we came across another YouTuber, he had a number list of the creepiest things ever caught on camera. It went through various ghost sightings, unexplained occurrences, and even dabble into the unexplained creature territory. The YouTuber started to talk about the rake, some creepypasta creature. As with the other items on the list, it has some photos and videos attached, all of which look like whatever that is. Until I came across this one photo, a photo of a long creature sitting on all fours. Robin then quickly said, "That looks like that thing we saw on the roof. Remember that, Kuya?" I looked up and squinted. "Yeah, kind of. I'm surprised you remember that." "No, she's right," my wife added. "I remember it as well, and it did look very similar to that." We laughed it off as a strange experience, and proceeded to watch the video, which more or less said, the rake lives within the deep woods. Reports have also cited the creature in places like Louisiana. We all froze. The hair on the back of my neck stood up as it all came crashing back. I looked up to see my wife, and Robin in similar instances of all. "Holy crap," I said. "Now that is creepy." The video proceeded to show more convincing footage of the rake with glowing eyes through a video from a sewer tunnel. I know you know the video I'm talking about. As I watched it though, I started to feel uneasy. Those eyes, they pierced through me. I mean, that's exactly what I remember staring back at me from way before. Then the creature in the video then ducked out of view, moving in the same fluid, yet jittery motion as it did on the roof. My wife and sister froze, both visually shaken. This sparked a big discussion on cryptids and the like, ending with both my wife and sister telling me to share our story. Someone has to know something, they said. Something I forgot to mention earlier was the smell. There was always this dry, musty, rotting smell lingering in the air whenever we remember seeing it. But I couldn't find anything that talked about how the rake smells. Guys, did we really encounter the rake back home? Is it possible that there's more than one out there? I mean, what else could it be? I know it's hard to explain, but the creature in that video, its movement was so similar. And those eyes, one doesn't forget a sight like that. Not at all. Especially once you've seen it on your neighbor's roof. My parents divorced when I was 8 years old. They had just bought a house together in the woods in Walker, Louisiana. After seeing his relationships, I realized that this is something my father does when his marriage is rocky. He sells his house and then buys or builds a new one for the sake of distraction. I actually seen it work for him. Once engaged in a new project and excited by the possibilities, his wife might forget to ask why he was out so late, who he was with, and why he smells like another woman's perfume. Except at this time, his trick didn't work. My mother finally had enough. I don't even think we lived in that house in the woods for a full year before my mother suggested he go stay with his whore instead. I wasn't terribly upset by this. My father and I had never been close. He was a no-nonsense high school coach, and I was skinny and weird, far from the son that he actually wanted. To be fair though, he didn't try to push me into sports or pressure me to follow football. Instead, he ignored me entirely in favor of my little brother, Trent, who seemed like he was born with a ball in his hand. Trent didn't play one sport. He played every single one of them, starting when he was merely a baby. I never resented either of them for this. I merely mentioned it to help paint a picture of my brother. If Trent and I had been one person, we would actually be a very well-rounded individual. You would have me being dreamy and even-tempered, Trent sporty and rough and emotional, living up very well to the reputation that came with his bright red hair, even when he was still in diapers. You couldn't have two more opposite children, but we loved each other, especially in the early years of our parents' divorce. Even though there were 3 bedrooms in this house in the woods, Trent and I shared one, not wanting to be separated. That changed around the time I turned 10. I was starting to get a light dusting of very fine pubic hair, as well as the weird, self-exploring sessions that came with it. So I figured it was time to get my own room. Without so much asking my mom, I began moving my things to the room across the hall to claim my new space. We had been living in that house in the woods for a couple of years now, and even though it had felt large and empty in the days following my father's leave, now it felt like home. And I had claimed a new room all for myself, where I wouldn't be bothered by Trent's nightlight or those soft, irritating, snuffy noises he made in his sleep. But still, even though I figured I was too old for a nightlight, the inky darkness of my room when I turned my bedside lamp off was just a bit too much. My mother would sleep in her room at the end of the hall with the door open, so she could hear us if we called, and she would often fall asleep watching TV. The ghostly blue glow of the TV in her room illuminated mine, just enough to pacify me. So I began sleeping with my bedroom door open. I was 10 then, but I'm 30 now. I have not been able to sleep with my bedroom door open for about 20 years because of what I saw standing in my room that night. I don't know what woke me up. I was simply awake and I hadn't been a moment before. Everything was quiet and everything was still. The sleep timer on my mother's TV must have clicked it off because there was no noise anywhere, not even the sound of the air conditioner, not even crickets in the woods outside. Simple, unbroken, silence. I lay in bed for a while, staring at my ceiling and puzzling over why I was even awake. I realized I was very cold, even though the AC wasn't running. With a small shiver, I pulled my cover around my shoulders and rolled over to my side to face my bedroom door, and there it was. As I'm typing this, a strong chill is passing through me. Even 20 years later, the thought of that thing is enough to make every hair on my body stand straight up. I actually gotta pee quite badly too, but I don't feel like I can move until I finish writing this, and I'm done with it. Until I push that thing out of my head. Actually, to be honest, a small part of me is afraid that I'm writing about it tonight, and that you are listening to this, because what if I have somehow summoned it, and it's gonna be waiting for me in the hallway when I go to the bathroom. But anyways, I'm not sure what I saw, but it was tall. To a 10-year-old anyways, and it was very thin. It seemed to shine in the thick darkness of my room. It was so pale. Its skin seemed white and thinner than paper. Its head was round, hairless, a hairless dome. It was naked, I think, and even though I could see no privates, I could make out the sharp ridges and curves of its hips, its fingers, which hung limply at the end of flat, large hands like giant white spiders. It seemed unusually long and alien to me. Whether or not it had a mouth or even a nose, I could not say. The darkness was too deep and the thing too wide to even make such distinctions. The worst part about it, though, was its eyes. I could see those. Or maybe it had no eyes. Maybe those round black holes in its face were empty sockets. Or maybe its brow was so heavy it was hiding them in its shadow. Whether they were there or not, I knew those eyes were looking at me. I froze. A scream rose up in me. But I didn't move. I couldn't move. The thing saw me. I knew. But maybe it didn't realize that I was looking at it. Maybe if I just kept pretending to be asleep, it would leave me alone. I dared not to close my eyes. But I couldn't let the thing out of my sight for a moment. What if it was attempting to come closer? We stared at each other for what felt like forever. But in reality, it was no more than a minute or two. Neither of us moving. Neither of us making a sound. Both of us just staring. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. It didn't acknowledge me. It didn't even attack me. It didn't even make a sound, except for the odd popping of its joints and the creaking of the floorboards under its feet as it strolled down the hall to the kitchen. It was gone. But still, I couldn't move. The thing was still out there somewhere, and it was even more terrible out of sight than from when it was standing in front of me. At least when I could see it, I knew where it was and what it was up to. Now, my mind was full with horrific possibilities of what this thing might be capable of what kind of terrible appetites it must possess. I lay there in the dark for over an hour, fretting over this strange creature and listening to the dark, looking for any sign that it was still around, but nothing came. I took a deep breath and got ready to do the bravest thing I had done in all my 10 years. I got ready to run to my mother. I slowly slipped out of bed, expecting the moment my feet hit the floor for the thing to snatch them, but it didn't. I stepped carefully and quietly to my bedroom door, expecting that the moment I peeked my head out, it would be there. But it wasn't. I looked to my left, and then I looked right. I looked to my left again, and then, in a burst of speed that I didn't even know I was capable of, I bolted down to my mother's room.
My sudden and explosive entry was enough to make her stir. "Drew," she said while clicking on her bedside lamp. "Is that you? What's wrong?" Mom, there's something in the house. I saw something looking at me. It was standing in my bedroom doorway and it was looking at me, and I think it kind of looked like the kid from Powder, like a bald albino or something." I was so relieved to be with her and telling her what I had saw that I didn't notice the look of shock over her face until she grabbed me and pulled me close to her. She was wide awake now and she looked terrified. "What did you say?" "You said someone was standing in your doorway looking at you?" I nodded. She turned and looked over her shoulder, and that's when I realized for the first time that she wasn't alone. My brother, Trent, was asleep in the bed beside her. My mother leaped out of bed and went over to her closet, where she kept her handgun. My mother hated that thing, but she insisted on having one. A single mother with only a 10 and a 6-year-old needed to protect herself. "Mom, what's wrong?" I was starting to get scared again. She snatched the cordless phone off its cradle and called my grandfather, who lived about 2 miles away. "Dad," she whispered into the receiver, "I need you to stay on the phone with me. If something happens, call the police. About an hour ago, Trent came in and got in bed with me. He said he couldn't sleep because somebody was standing in his bedroom doorway watching him. And now, Drew just came in and told me the same thing. I think somebody's in the house." I had never heard my mother so scared. Maybe it's Tommy, or maybe it's somebody else. If it's Tommy, I'm getting a restraining order. Apparently divorce wasn't enough. "Mom, it's not Dad," I said. "It can't be. It was too thin. Dad's got a big belly." "Sweetie, shh." "Okay, Dad, I'm walking through the house right now. Yes, I have my gun. Drew, follow me. If anything happens, run back here and lock the door and do not open it until Grandpa or the police get here." I nodded. My mother began to move down the hall, turning on light after light as she did so, checking every room, every closet, and within a couple of minutes, the whole house had been searched. Only one room left, the kitchen. My mother entered the room and flipped on the light, seeming to fully expect my father or some crazy killer to be standing there. But no, the kitchen was empty too, and we were alone. We were safe. With a sigh of relief, my mother said goodbye to my grandfather and put the phone down on the kitchen counter. "There's nobody here, Drew. You must have had a bad dream, that's all." "No, Mom. I know when I'm dreaming. This wasn't a dream and Trent saw it too. Did you both watch that Powder movie recently or some—" "Mom!" I shouted. She jumped and startled. "What? What is it?" I pointed. The kitchen door, which led out to the backyard and to the thick, old woods beyond it, stood slightly open. I'm still not sure what I saw that night. I have thought about it and discussed it with my brother and my mother. In recent years, I even questioned my father about it. He wasn't doing too well for a couple of years following the divorce. He was doing some weird and creepy things. But no, he wasn't there that night. And to be honest, I never even thought he had. But I still had to ask, because the other options are too frightening to consider. I don't suppose I'll ever know what that thing was. Maybe that's for the best. What I do know is, I haven't slept with my bedroom door open since that night. Even if for some reason I forget to shut it all the way before I climb in bed, I won't be able to sleep until I go and close it. Because now, in every dark doorway, I see that white face, and I also see those terrible, dark eyes staring at me.
Do you know someone who's been involved with bad medicine on the REZ? I'm not just referring to things found around you, about curses and words being spoken out, the things about somebody falling and breaking their leg. No, I'm talking about real bad medicine, like about my friend who lost 3 family members within 3 weeks, 2 cousins and 1 uncle. As soon as he told me this, I knew it had to do with bad medicine, with witchcraft. I remember my grandmother always said that death always comes in threes. She said we start to die the day that we're born, and that some things can only be found through a ceremony. I grew up very traditional, going to all the ceremonies as a kid, going to the sweat lodge 4 times, and following all the rules of the REZ that you've spoken on here about before. So when my friend told me this, I mentioned that maybe his family should come talk to my uncle, because it sounds like something is going on, some dark stuff, bad medicine type of things. He told me that it's what him and his mom were thinking, but that his dad didn't believe in that type of stuff. How sad. Anyways, a few weeks passed and he called me and told me that his sister's husband had passed away now as well. He said that his sister went into the kitchen late at night to get a drink of water. As she was getting water and she looked out the window, she saw some sort of bear with a humanoid face. She froze for a while and then screamed. She said her husband came running into the kitchen and also saw this thing, and he ran out the kitchen door and ran after it. This thing ran straight towards the mountain, straight up the face of a cliff. She said her husband couldn't believe it. It was impossible for any man to go up a cliff that way. 3 days later, her husband went missing. She said they heard noises outside their home, and he again went to go look around, and he didn't come back inside. His body was discovered later that day. The findings of the medical examiner deemed that someone had killed him. He died from trauma to the head, and they haven't found who killed him. So again, I told him that it sounds like something dark is going on, and that they should reach out to my uncle who practices medicine. My friend then mentioned that's actually why he's reaching out to me. He said that his dad finally bit into the traditional dogma and wanted to speak to him. These are his words, not mine. He told him everything that's been happening and the family members who've been dying. Basically, they did conduct a ceremony. I'm not sure what happened in the ceremony, but they didn't tell me. But my friend did share with me that my uncle said that someone in their family was starting to get involved in dark practices, and that's why these things were happening to them. Not only this, but someone had nailed a bladder of a goat to a tree that was struck by lightning. Inside of it were things that were linked to him and his family. And then my uncle said, once it falls, someone else in the family is gonna die. As for everything else that was happening, it was because of the state of the bladder. The more it decayed, the more terrible things were gonna happen. So my uncle gave them some kind of protection item to keep them safe in the meantime, and that in a few days, they would go out to find the tree. The next day they all went out, and as my uncle said, they did end up finding the tree. The tree itself was dead, fried by thunder. My uncle then approached the tree. Nailed to its burnt bark was a bladder of a goat, clustering brown dry blood and swarming with bugs. My friend said that his dad was about to touch it, and that's when my uncle shouted and said to not ever touch anything like this. My uncle then approached it. There's some things with some eagle feather, and then started praying. He then got it with a cloth and the nails popped out. The nails themselves didn't even look like normal nails, like the ones you buy from a store. After he got the bladder, he opened it, and inside, he finds bundles of hair, fragments of bones, even what looked to be a fang of a snake, and a picture of my friend's family. My uncle then said that whoever did this, it was out of jealousy. But not only this, it will now come back twofold, and that they're gonna find out who it was pretty soon. I know it's difficult, but pray for them. Forgiveness is better, because only Creator can give or take it. You shouldn't be saying someone's name after they have passed away, just like you should get rid of their belongings and burn their clothes when they pass. You don't want to disturb them or confuse them by saying their name. They're actually starting their new journey. These are teachings that my grandma gave me. Like, did you know that their spirit sticks around for 4 days? They go visit the places that meant something to them. That's another reason you need to cover your mirrors as well, especially in those 4 days. It actually makes me just want to get rid of mirrors overall, to be honest. Don't wash your own clothes and such until after the 4 days have passed. I even told some friends in the past about the burning of clothes, and they told me that they didn't know. But they actually weren't familiar at all about the whole getting rid of stuff, especially the burning of clothes. Another thing my grandma said was to not cry because it will cause the spirits to stick around, to actually try to be near you and longer. She even told me a story of a mom and daughter where the daughter keeps crying after her mother's death. One night, the mom comes to her and tells her she needs to keep her head up, and something about stop crying because she can't pass on to the spirit world. You see, it's an adjustment for them. After they return to our ancestors, it can be a very busy time in the world. For now, give that family member some time to fully adjust to the other side. So now back to the burning of clothes, personal belongings of those who are no longer with us, especially items that were close to them, such as clothes or possessions. They all need to be burned or destroyed. My grandma said it helps release the spirit from attachments to the physical world, and to also stop any lingering energy that can affect us. It's been a while since my grandma passed on. My parents aren't very traditional, and I'm really trying to go back and learn as much as I can. Has anybody else heard of similar things to do when a relative passes? I don't care if you believe me. This whole thing is gonna sound completely unreal, almost like a fever dream. Nobody believes me, but someone might know just what the hell happened here. So I had turned 19, and I decided to go visit my grandfather in North Michigan. A bit of backstory about my grandfather. He lives in a cabin. I never really knew him too well. I only saw him a few times. All I already know about him is that back in the 70s, he was in Vietnam. When I was 17, he confessed to me that he felt terrible about the things that he had to do over there. He was told to beat somebody with a shovel until he died. After that, I kinda just would avoid him. I was too freaked out to talk to him. I guess the old guilt caught up with him and kinda affected his mind. But now, he knew that he was nearing the end of his life. He was having some health issues and refused medication. He did invite me over since I'm his last living relative, and he wanted to spend some time with me before he passed. At first I didn't want to, but I decided that this is what my father would have wanted. After about 3 hours of driving, I get to his cabin. It's a nice area. It looked almost like it was made out of Lincoln logs or something. He's waiting outside, smoking a pipe, and rocking in some chair, suspenders and all, like somebody you'll see who's a stereotypical of an old farmer guy. But he looks exhausted. I can see dark circles under his saggy eyes. He gets up and gives me a big bear hug. He's trying to hug me as hard as he can, but he can barely walk, and I can see that he's very weak. We hug for a few minutes, mostly because I find it too awkward to break away. I remind myself that even though I only remember him for a few years, he's known me most of my life. Halfway through, he starts kind of breathing heavy on me. He sniffles. I realize that he's been crying silently. He breaks away and says, "Come inside, son." I go inside to a very cozy cabin. It's getting cold, especially in Michigan, so he has the fire going. He has running water, a gas stove, and 2 beds. One of them is very new. I think he bought it just for me. After a few minutes, I begin to care for him. I kind of begin to remember my grandfather, if that makes sense. The bond of family becomes newly important. That's when I decide to be his living helper until he dies. That very day, he starts to make some decaf, but halfway through, he starts to sweat. I help him sit down by the fire and finish the coffee. My coffee tastes terrible, but he's still very appreciative. He assures me it's delicious. After the decaf, we get ready for bed. He lies on the small bed and tells me to sleep on the new one. When I tell him that we should switch, he refuses. I guess he did buy it for me. He then said his prayers and goes to sleep. I can't stand it, watching this old dying man, my own flesh and blood, sleeping on that pile of junk. He's quite small and frail, even though he's not thin. So with a bit of effort, I was able to lift him up gently and tuck him into the big bed. I move the small bed to the window, and I make sure to sleep facing it. That way the sun wakes me up. When the sun does wake me up, it's like 6 a.m. I slide the bed back and switch my grandpa back. I then lay on the good bed for another 20 minutes before I realize that I can't fall asleep again. All that lifting woke me up, so I decided to make some breakfast, and I end up packing his pipe as well. I go to the outhouse near the cabin because the flushing might wake him up. When I'm done, I step outside, and then notice something behind this cabin. It seems like a gate holding 6 black horses. They're shackled in these massive metal chains. Each horse has a huge metal ring around their necks. They're all chained together to the ground. Since it is 6 a.m. and the forest is dark, they actually look really creepy, like something straight out of hell. I thought that maybe it was a trick of the light, but their faces looked all kinds of screwed up. Their eyes looked almost red. I thought it might just be a reflection, almost like how cameras show some red pupils. I stepped back inside to find my grandpa awake, sitting on his bed. I talked about what we were going to do for the day. He said his back felt good enough today that he might want to do some fishing. Not to stroke my own ego, but I do attribute that to me, letting him sleep on the good bed. After a breakfast of eggs and bacon, I drive him to a pond near the house. We fish for a while, just silent the entire time. It wasn't awkward though, it was a comfortable silence. I didn't catch anything, but he caught a 3-pounder. I had to help him reel it in. He was very proud of himself, and it actually made me happy. He said that he used to love to go out fishing. I told him that we would make it into dinner. On the drive back, I asked him about the horses. I had kind of forgotten about them since the early morning. Instantly, I knew I shouldn't have brought this up. His smile was replaced with a kind of stern grin. He told me not to worry about it, and that they were just some sort of pets. I almost listened to him, except he nervously quivered when he said, "Worry never happened before, or after." So I doubt that it was just an old man thing. He showed me how to gut and debone the fish. We marinated and dry rubbed for about 30 minutes, while he was out there puffing on his pipe. When he was doing this, I opened the curtains to the back window and peered at the horses. They hadn't moved at all. They hadn't even ate or slept. They didn't look cold, but they were still shooting hot breath from their nose. I know because it was cold. I saw it. I then stepped outside to talk to my grandpa about the horses. "Did you not feed the horses or something?" He then says, "You don't feed those horses, son. Not this type." I had no clue what he meant by that. Every time that I inquired, he would just ignore me or change the subject. When he was done, we stepped inside and had our dinner. I then noticed that he prayed extra long that night. The next morning, I just woke up with the sun, and I put my grandpa back into his bed. I decided to get a bit closer to the horses this time. I got just barely close enough so I could see them. I don't even think they noticed me. Remembering it now, it sent shivers down my spine. It was terrifying. They had shaggy, matted fur, deformed and bent out of shaped skulls. I know for sure that their rib cages should have not been indented like that. Their teeth looked like they had been chewing on rocks or something. It wasn't just their appearance. I've been around deformed animals before. It doesn't really bother me so much. But these things had a really screwed up presence. Like the feeling in your stomach after you watch some really screwed up things on the internet. Or like you see someone die. Initially, I felt bad for them. But now I didn't even want to see them. Strange enough, I also wanted to get closer. But I couldn't do it. One of them looked at me in the eyes. And if I hadn't just used the bathroom, I most likely would have pissed myself. I ran back into the cabin to hide. Grandpa was just starting to wake up, so I tried forgetting about it and got to work. Today was a supply day, meaning that we were going to go into town to refill on food and other small things. I decided to buy Grandpa a cake as well. Not for any special reason, just that it's nice to have some fun while he could. He always gets someone to deliver food for him, but it was good to get some exercise. Plus, his back was feeling better. We rode into town, and that's when Grandpa said that he was getting sick. The poor guy hadn't been in a car for years. Maybe motion sickness got to him, but we had to pull over. After that, I realized that we had to go quick. We picked everything up and I hid the cake from Grandpa to surprise him with it at the cabin. When we got back, something was wrong. There's a racket coming from the back of the cabin. I then pull the car up and step outside. The horses are going nuts. Later on the floor behind them are some kind of white balls. Grandpa then tells me very sternly to get in the fucking cabin. Shouldn't we drive away? And he said, son, the worst thing we can do right now is try to escape. I have no clue what the hell he's on about. When we get inside, he starts explaining. Now, remember, he's an old man, and he's also injured, so I can barely understand him. He starts talking about how he didn't know that they were there when he bought the cabin, but if he leaves, he's gonna die. They must have ate something, from what I can piece together through everything that he's told me. If you feed them, they get stronger, and they can draw things in better. He said the most that we can do is hope that they run out of things to eat. Then, there was a snap, a loud crack like a whipping snapping through the air. Grandpa goes silent. I then say, what the hell was that? He stares at me kinda empty like, well, looking back at it, he was accepting his death. He then says, one of them broke the chains. I then said, what the hell are you talking about? He then looks at me and says, behind you. I whip around, facing the building. Son, you're a good kid. And then I lose consciousness, and I wake up with the sun beaming on my face. I wake up in a pile of my own blood. There's a crowbar at my side. My headache is terrible. I touch the back of my head. It's just a flesh wound. I pick myself up and try not to vomit. I sit down and try to come to. Everything hurts. I'm freezing. Then I think, wait, why am I freezing? The right wall of the cabin is full of holes. It almost looks like someone threw boulders through the wall. I then think, where's Grandpa? There's no sign of him. I open the door and step outside. I check behind, and the gates have been trampled. The chains are broken. I get closer. Those white things that were all crushed up were just rabbits. The horses would have chewed them and then spit them out. I start to piece everything together, and I throw up a few times. Long story short, I walked back to the cabin and picked up a few things. I picked up my grandpa's pipe and his bluegrass tobacco. I found the golden cross that he kept in his cabinet. I drove home without stopping. The next day, I called up a delivery boy, and I asked him to deliver to the house so I could see if I dreamed the whole thing. After a while, he calls me and is asking what house I was talking about. He said that there used to be a house there, but it's been burned down for years. Guys, I have no idea what the hell happened that day. I'm sitting here smoking his pipe. Honestly, it's the only proof that any of this ever happened. My therapist can't explain it, since I literally have his pipe as physical evidence. My priest can't explain it since there's no record of demonic horses, or anything as far as we know. My friends just tell me that I'm full of shit. I'm not even sure what else to do. What the hell happened back there? I live in Pennsylvania and I spend time hiking up in the Poconos. My friend who I used to go hiking with went down to Appalachian State University. He's always telling me how I should come down for some inner woods fun. So in the summer of 2006, I drive down from Pennsylvania to North Carolina to spend the week backpacking. He introduces me to his friends and we get stupid drunk the first night, having a great time and all. The next day we start getting stuff together to go on a hike. So we should have started around 8 a.m., but we ended up not getting out until 1 p.m., simply because of all of us being hungover. We plan to stay out there for 4 nights. We split up the gear evenly among us, and one of the guy's girlfriends drives us out there to the start of the trail. The trail ends up being a little more than a game path. We all tell her that we'll call her to pick us up from a diner that's on the other side of the park from a payphone. Now, I was in decent shape. I have never smoked a day in my life, and I had a decent amount of hiking under my belt. Even though we weren't that high, I'm still huffing and puffing like a chain smoker. They ended up going at a steady pace, and I was struggling to keep on. They keep asking if I'm alright, and I just tell them that I'm getting used to the elevation change. I struggle to keep up in the late afternoon, and it's almost getting to dusk. Never have I pushed myself so hard as I am right now. My heart beats in my ears, my vision is getting blurry, and they all keep stopping for me to catch up. The rest of the group is trying to push for a campsite, and it happens to be me that's slowing them down. I end up dragging further and further behind the group, every time they look back, telling them it's okay for them to keep going. My friend comes back and tells me that the group is going to go ahead of us and get a campsite going, and he's going to stay back with me. I tell him to go on, I should be alright. He tells me it's not that big of a deal, and that they understand the elevation differences and stuff. At this point, I never felt worse in my whole life. I couldn't even catch my breath. I had a pounding headache. I couldn't even see right. I couldn't go on even if I wanted to. He tells me to sit down and take a rest. We'll catch up to them at whatever campsite they pick. They all said that we should be able to see the campsite from the trail, so I sit down, trying to catch my breath. I close my eyes for what feels like a moment. When I open them, it's pitch black out. I call out for my friend, but there's no answer. I still feel terrible, but just a little bit better than before. I fumble out the headlamp. The high, medium, and low modes don't work. Only moonlight mode works. It does this when the battery is low. I strap it on. It's bright enough to follow the trail anyways, which is a good thing. I glance at my watch. It's 1 a.m. I've been out here for a long time. I call out for my friend again, but there's no answer. I'm starting to get a little freaked out, but I figured that he went to the camp. It shouldn't be that far off. I start off at a slow pace, keeping my breathing in check. I'm watching my footing. I hiked the trail for about an hour. There's no sign of my friends. I started to wonder if I'm even on the trail at all. I'm thinking that I should do some backtracking, but I decide against it. I go on for a bit. There's still no signs of my group, and I'm getting less and less sure of being on the trail. I look back at my watch. It still says 1 a.m. That's when I realize it's broken, and I notice that the day is off. It says Monday, and we started off on Friday. I start panicking, and I just yell my friend's name as loud as I can. There's no answer. I decided to go against my judgment and backtrack to where I started from. Somehow, I ended up on a path up on a ridge. Never in my life have I seen so few signs of humanity. I can only really see what I think is a city way off in the distance. I started thinking about just heading down the ridge towards the city. I start heading down the mountain towards the slope, towards the light. However, as I get just a little ways down, the light disappears behind the tree line. At this point, I'm panicking about being lost. I'm pushing myself too much at the elevation that I was not adjusted to. Halfway down the slope, I hear something from the top of the ridge. I say something because I'm not sure what I heard, but I did hear something. It sounded almost like a log being dropped. I can't see the trails I was on, but I thought it was most likely my friends. I start yelling at the top of my lungs. That's when I hear somebody yell back. But at that time, it didn't occur to me that that yell didn't sound like anyone from my group. I was just happy that I got found. I then start saying, "Guys, I'm coming back up. Don't move." I start trying to get back up the ridge. I'm struggling, pushing myself hard again. I'm about half the distance to the top of the ridge when I stop, and I try to see my friend's flashlight. My headlamp is on moonlight mode, so I can't really see anything. I then see what I think is a figure coming towards me. I think it's my friend, and I think I was getting really scared. I stop as I look, and this figure was not human. It was too big and not the right shape. It looked too slender in some parts. Now, my headlamp does this thing where if the battery is low, it will only shine moonlight mode, but if I switch it over to turbo, it will light up for about half a second before kicking back down to moonlight mode. I reach up and switch my light to turbo to light up the figure. The bright flash was enough to light up this thing in front of me, about 30 feet up the slope. What I remember most was that it had a face that almost looked like a possum, but it was bigger than a human head. I screamed out the worst scream I had in me, and I turned around and started running down the slope. I only got 5 steps in before I tripped and rolled down the slope. Things get really hazy at this point. I remember coming to a stop in a sharp pain coming from my head down to my neck. It felt like I was being stabbed. I was laying on my belly, trying to move down the rest of the slope. Every time that I try to look back, the pain in my neck would almost make me pass out. I do remember, though, hearing something coming up on me as I crawled. I was moving so slow that anything that wanted me could definitely catch up pretty quick. My head was spinning. The pain was unbearable in my neck. I was struggling to catch my breath. I felt like the thing was right on top of me. At this point, my body stopped listening to me, and I couldn't move anymore. I think I passed out there for a while. It's hard to tell. I slowly pushed myself over my back. I still only have moonlight mode on. I can't really see. I try to reach out to my headlamp to try the turbo mode again, but before my arm gets to it, the shooting pain in my neck brings my arm back down. I lay on my back for a while, trying to see or hear anything up on the slope, but I hear nothing. I slowly start to get up. Every time that I flex my neck, it gets a crippling pain in my body. I start shuffling down the rest of the slope, going from tree to tree and leaning against them. I'm in pure panic at this point, even crying, just straight up sobbing. I'm trying to rack my brain on what to do. I keep trying to head straight to where I think I saw the lights, the town where the college is in. After a while, my sobbing slowly stops, and I start to be able to think normally. I'm trying to figure out how bad my neck is hurt and how far I have to go. I'm resting on a tree. I close my eyes for a second, and then suddenly, I feel something on my back. I turn around, and I swing my arms the best that I can. I get blinded by light. I'm still swinging and kicking with this light blowing in my eyes. I end up on the ground, my arms being held on my side. Pain is in my neck. It's making me sick, but I keep trying to struggle. My eyes start to adjust, and it turns out that it's my friend and one of the hiking buddies. They're talking about something, but I can't hear them. I nod my head, and they let go. I keep saying that I can't hear them. They look at me like I'm missing a face or something. The other guy takes some water out of his bag and gives it to me. I drink it, trying to tell them everything that happened. I keep saying that my neck is hurt. They help me up and we start walking. They keep saying something to me. I can just barely now make out what they're saying. Slowly, we get back to the campsite. My hearing is coming back a little bit. I sit down on a log to rest. I then ask my friend, "Why did you end up leaving me?" He then says that he didn't. He says he couldn't wake me up, and then he ran to the campsite to get help. But when he came back, I was just gone. I tell them what happened. Both of them then look at me like I'm crazy. I ask where the others are at. They tell me that they're also looking for me. I started to feel silly about telling them what I saw. I'm starting to think it was just my head playing tricks on me. My neck starts to feel a little bit better. I start asking about what time the others will be back. They said they would return around midnight. I tell them that I'm going to sleep for a bit. I fall asleep pretty quickly by laying down by the fire. My friend then wakes me up looking scared as hell. The other guys came back, and they were packing everything up. My friend then says, "We gotta go, right now." Like, right fucking now. I heard the guys that were looking for me talking about how they were being followed in the woods, and they also kept seeing something. I wake up and I ask them, "Did it look like a possum?" The guys just stare at me and then he goes, "We gotta get the fuck out of here right now." We hike it the way we came. Once again, I'm slower than the group. Only this time, my friend actually stays with me. The rest of the group goes out of sight. He then says, "Don't worry, man. I'm not leaving you." I keep stopping to catch my breath and rest my neck. My friend's staying with me. He doesn't even rush me. He then says, "Don't worry, man. I've been out in these woods at night so many times. I can get us back." We keep moving at a slow pace. My friend keeps saying stuff like, "You guys just got spooked. There's a lot of things out here in the woods that go bump in the night." I'm resting with my back against a tree. My friend's just looking around and waiting for me. I then look at him, and he looks behind me. His face is frozen. He then says, "We have to move a little faster." At this point, he turns and gets my backpack strap and starts pulling me along. I don't question it. I just push as hard as I can. After running for what seems like forever, we finally get to the road. and we see the group huddle around a payphone. They called one of the guy's girlfriends for a ride. She shows up and takes me right to the hospital. I keep trying to tell her the story of what happened. We all do, but she doesn't buy it. To this day, we still talk about what happened, but none of us go around that area no more. I don't even go into any woods at night anymore. The weird thing is that my friend, he still keeps going back there. I think that's pretty weird. You should never have parties with strangers on the REZ. Not just strangers, but with people you just truly don't know. Nowadays, I don't let coworkers or people I don't really know into my house. I know better, and this is all because of something that happened in my past, what I gone through. These experiences have made me into who I am now. I came upon a story on here about the devil. I'm sure that you, as many others on the REZ, have heard the stories about him. Some see him as a man in a trench coat and hat. Others see him as a good-looking person that women fall head over heels for. Someone who buys the whole bar a drink. Other people describe him as a stranger who gives them anything they need or anything they want. You know, all the very cliche type of stuff. Not to discredit anybody or their experience, but I have a story myself about an encounter with him, or whatever this thing was. Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was something else. I can't really confirm it, but I do think it was somewhat pure evil because of what happened after that encounter. The reason I say this is because I used to live a crazy life. Drugs, alcohol, all those things make you open to these forces out there, the ones that we can't always see. I have had ceremonies done in the past so that I could leave, but I also had to change my lifestyle. You can't expect for these things to just disappear through a ceremony. The ceremony is done to cleanse and heal and figure stuff out, but at the end of it, you also have to play your part, and that's the main goal for all of us who are struggling, right? Fighting every day. At least that's what I try to do every day of my life. It's not easy, and some days are difficult. I have learned to just take everything one day at a time, leaning on the Creator every single day as I walk the red road. Well, anyways, I changed my life. I quit drinking and doing drugs as well, but I still had to work, and I was a bartender. I know, you might be calling me a hypocrite, but it's complicated and weird, and I don't want to make this story too long, but God is not done with me yet. All this change doesn't happen overnight, and trust me, change is still happening, and I didn't stay working there at the bar for too long. One night, it was just me bartending, and there were a few customers sitting around, drinking and eating, including my friend Robbie. Robbie was always there at the bar, that's what it seemed like, especially when I was bartending. I think he just wanted to get some free drinks the best that he could. The bar was kinda lonely, not like some other days. There was this random guy who walked in and sat at the bar. The crazy thing about it was that it seemed like the lights dimmed, and the jukebox started playing really fast. Actually, a different song started playing, but you get the point. I just had an ugly feeling from him. So he ordered a drink. He looked at me with this weird look. I'm not sure. It just felt strange. Anyways, he grabbed this drink and went to go sit down at a table. I kept my eye on him because, you know, as a bartender, you should always be mindful of your surroundings. I kept looking his way every now and then. He just seemed weird. He was dressed normal, just a normal looking dude. He was just sitting there, drinking. And I swear at some point he had his head down, and it seemed like he started praying. At least that's what it seemed like. After a few minutes, he started pulling out a deck of cards, and he was just shuffling away. Some of the guys around there got closer to him when they saw he had a deck of cards, and that he was by himself. Even Robbie went over there at some point. Maybe because I wasn't giving him my whole attention, he started doing card tricks and then began telling people their future. How do I know this? Because, as time went on, Robbie came up to the bar to get more drinks, and he said to put it on the man's tab. Robbie told me that this guy that walked in, he's telling everyone their future. He knows stuff that's happened in the past that nobody would know. I looked at Robbie as he was telling me this, and I told him to be careful. People who mess with stuff like that, they're using powers that we don't understand. It's about what's behind them. You never know what kind of spirits or forces they're communicating with, and we should leave those things alone. In our culture, we have a deep respect for the spiritual side of things, and we're always reminded that not everything is meant to be digged into. These are all teachings from the elders that talk about the dangers of using bad medicine or manipulating things for personal gain. I remember one of the things I was told at a past ceremony was to never accept any kind of gift from a stranger, words, or a physical gift, even any sort of blessing. I mean, even outside the REZ, everyone knows this, especially when they seem too good to be true. Any gift, any favor, they're not always free. Robbie told me that I was looking into it too much, and that I was overthinking it, and he kept saying it was just some drunk guy doing tricks and telling stories to pass time, and that I was overthinking it. A small group eventually got around him, and Robbie kept coming up, and he told me that he kept asking about me, and that he also wanted to see my future as well. I declined, because, based off of everything that I just said. The man stayed for a while. After a few hours, yes, it was a few hours, the man stood up, gathered his cards, and he came up to the bar for the tab. He then walked out as quietly just like he came in. Robbie came to say goodbye as it was closing hour, and then we all went about our own business. Days, weeks, months went by. I found me a different job, and me and Robbie kind of stopped talking, I guess because I no longer worked at the bar. Again, this town on the REZ is not big. Everyone knows everyone. I say this because within the next 2 years, and maybe I'm overlooking it, but to this day, I will forever be grateful that I denied that request at the bar, because every single person whose future he read is gone. Not days after, not weeks, not months, but about 2 years later, one after another, all within a short time frame. They all died. Some of them were really good people. I got to know them, including my friend Robbie, who died in a car crash head on. I know it sounds like a crazy messed up story, especially because who else was there? To everyone else, it seemed just like random deaths that occurred. But I know everyone who died within those few months were the same people talking with that man at the bar. He didn't have a trench coat. I didn't see a tail or deer feet or anything. I know it was him. I do wonder when someone randomly passes away on the REZ, if there was something going on behind closed doors that we don't know about. It's not a coincidence that every single person surrounding that man at the bar passed away in 1 year. What do you all think? Have you ever came across something like this? Or a person who offers somebody something, and then sometime later, that person ends up passing away? So, I have a story to tell, and I'm not sure if you all will believe me, but I have learned to not talk about skinwalkers, which in my defense, I'm not exactly talking about them. I'm just giving you all a warning. So I'll get straight to the point. Me and a group of friends decided to go camping at the Kaibab National Forest in Arizona. We were gathered around the campfire, talking about various topics, and of course, being right next to the Navajo Nation. The subject of skinwalkers and other things regarding the Navajo people was brought up. Questions as to why they're so secretive about these things. I know you all heard the tales and the stories about not sharing anything about them, and how they don't like to talk about skinwalker stuff with people outside the REZ. Anyways, we were surrounded by a dense forest, and looking at the stars above us, everything was so beautiful. As we started drinking and smoking, and the night deepened, my friend Cliff excused himself to step into the woods to go take a leak. And well, I know most guys know, but if you're a lady reading this, it doesn't take long to use the bathroom for us men. So anyways, a few minutes turned into 5, and then 10, and then 15, and it wasn't like him to be gone for so long. I mean, I know alcohol makes you go to the bathroom a lot,
and we're not really into pulling pranks into each other. So armed with a flashlight, I ventured into the trees, the same direction that I saw Cliff go. As I was walking, I was also calling for him. I walked for about 2 or 3 minutes into the trees, and there was nothing. There was only silence. There were no noises from anything, no insects, nothing. Then, I heard it. His voice. I knew it was him. I followed the sound and I started shouting for him. I thought he might have been hurt or something. So I kept calling out to him, and I kept hearing his voice. Over here. Finally, I stumbled into a clearing where I saw Cliff standing still, just looking up at the stars above him. "Hey, check this out, man," Cliff mentioned, motioning and pointing to the sky. "What the hell are you doing, Cliff?" I approached, with my flashlight aimed at his back. As I was coming out the tree line to him, that's when I felt something on my shoulder from behind. I jumped, and that's when I saw Cliff. Confusion set in. I shined my flashlight to the other person who I thought was Cliff, but when I looked at him, he was facing us. It was undeniably humanoid, but horribly wrong. Its eyes, unblinking, it reflected the light without any sign of life. Its mouth was wide open, and as the beam of light hit its face, its movements became erratic, jerking towards us at a slow speed. Stumbling but trying to walk like a human would. Panic surged through me and Cliff. We turned and fled through the darkness, driven by fear. We didn't stop to look back until we reached the safety of our campsite. We started shouting to the other two before we even got there. As we got to them, we started screaming that we gotta go. And so I don't even know if we packed up everything, but we got the fuck out of there. I have no idea what the hell that was. But after that encounter, we decided to never go camping again. Me and my friends have talked about what we possibly encountered that night, and we done research, and we all came to the conclusion that it must have been a skinwalker. So let this be the last time I ever mention this word itself. I don't mess with skinwalkers anymore. I don't talk about them. I know they might be trending right now with TikTok, but be careful. There's a reason the Navajo people don't talk about these things. Anyways, that's pretty much it. Like I said, you might not believe me, but that I'll leave up to you. I love summer. It's my favorite time of the year. I know some people prefer a different season, and those other ones are great too. But for me, there's just something relaxing about a warm summer day. Almost every year or so, a few of my friends and I have a little get together. We all take some time off from work and plan some sort of event. Last year was Eric's world famous barbecue party. Everything was great until Eric set a stack of paper plates on fire, and those blew into the various table covers we had arranged. We managed to curtail the fires before they had time to spread any further, but that didn't stop the fire department from showing up anyway. The year before that, Jimmy invited us over to his house for a pool party. He has a very nice in-ground pool, but none of us actually swam in it. We mostly just hung around his minibar, just drinking and chatting away. Nothing outrageous happened during that party, except for Eric's failed cannonball attempt. I could go on and on about all the events we experienced in the past, but I'm here to talk about what happened during my event last month. Like I mentioned previously, we had all taken some time off work, and it was my turn to decide what we would all do. We usually didn't take turns choosing like this, but no one seemed to come up with a different plan. I had been browsing through different destination spots and activities around my area. After searching for around an hour or two, I stumbled across a rather interesting post. Someone was renting out a lake house about an hour's drive north. Looking through the photos and glancing over the price, I knew right away this is what I wanted to do. I called the place and I got it rented out for the weekend. The woman on the phone sounded very excited about me renting the property. After finalizing everything, I called everyone else and told them my plan. They were all almost as excited as the woman. Eric wanted to bring his grill with him so he could barbecue one day. And Jimmy brought some fishing gear so we could lounge by the lake. Our other friend Peter tagged along with us as well. He isn't a very outdoors type of person, but he still offered to come with us. We each arrived at the lake house about mid-afternoon. The sun wasn't quite setting yet, which was good as it gave us a bit of time to survey the area and inspect the house itself. The house was much larger than I expected for the price I paid to rent it. It seemed like I had gotten a really good deal. It was between the massive lake and the crowded woods behind it. Only a solitary dirt trail cuts through the tree line, leading to and from the house itself. Eric was already unloading his grill not 5 minutes after he arrived, while Jimmy, Peter, and I entered the house. The inside of the house was very rustic, but I knew this much from the photos. Different types of mounted animals on the high walls. The living room area was quite large. It looked almost like a recreation hall. A wooden staircase wrapped along one edge, leading up to multiple bedrooms. An expansive kitchen took up the other half of the bottom floor, as well as a decent-sized bathroom. It looked like this place was designed for big groups of people to just enjoy and have fun. After exploring the house for a bit, I went outside and took in the surroundings. It was such a peaceful evening as I stood there taking in the fresh air. That's when I noticed something strange. Apart from Eric trying to mess around with his grill, there was no sound coming from the forest. I couldn't hear any birds, animals, or even insects. I could barely hear the sound from the lake nearby. Even though it was weird, I tried not to think too much of it. An hour or so passed by, and after eating some burnt steaks that Eric so graciously made for us, we each retired to our bedrooms. Sleeping in a new place always made me feel a bit nervous. I may be the only one, but whenever I stay in a hotel or at a friend's place, it always takes me forever to fall asleep, at least during the first night. This isn't really a major issue, as it doesn't keep me from traveling. The bedrooms were quite nice, minimal, yet decent. They had a small wooden frame bed, a stout dresser, and a nightstand with a small lamp. And on the far wall was a long window that overlooked the trees and the lake. I was lying there, letting my mind wander as my eyes danced around my room. I wasn't even staring at anything. I was just trying to take in my surroundings so I could fall asleep more easily next time. Minutes slowly ticked by, and I started to feel my eyelids close before a faint of movement out of the corner of my eye caused me to open them once again. I couldn't be sure, but I thought for a split second I saw someone standing outside my window. But that couldn't be possible, as the bedrooms were on the second floor, and it was a straight drop down to the dirt below. My eyes locked onto the window, but after focusing for a bit, there was nothing out there. The next day, we all got up bright and early. There wasn't a whole lot to do aside from wandering around the property, so that's what I did. Eric was already prepping some food, while Pete and Jimmy had started day drinking. I stood outside the wooden porch with a cup of coffee, looking out to the tree line nearby. I once again let my eyes drift around as I sipped my coffee, and once again, there wasn't any sound, which I still thought was strange. I wonder why it was so quiet in the woods, a place that is often filled with the sounds of life. As my eyes drifted, I spotted a bit of movement in the distance. It looked like something large, moving quickly through the trees. I thought it might have been a bear, but before I could adjust my gaze, whatever it was
had disappeared further into the trees. The rest of the day was uneventful. We spent most of the time down near the lake, drinking and fishing. Eric had made us some burgers, which actually weren't terrible, and before we knew it, the sun had faded. We all went to our bedrooms for the night, and I didn't have much trouble falling asleep this time around. 10 minutes after I had drifted off, I was startled awake by the sounds of screaming. My eyes cracked open and I sat up, looking around in the darkness. It took me a minute to recognize the voice. It was Jimmy. As I opened my bedroom door, I saw Eric opening his as well. We each gave each other a confused look before going to Jimmy's door and knocking. After receiving no answer, I opened his door. "Jimmy?" I called out. Jimmy was sitting on the floor, wide-eyed, covered in sweat. I asked him what was wrong. However, he wouldn't turn to look at me. His eyes seemed to be fixed on something else. Eric and I both glanced over in unison towards his window, and that's when I heard Eric, over my shoulder, shout, "What the fuck is that?" I didn't say anything. I just felt my muscles tighten. On the other side of Jimmy's window was a figure. It wasn't anything I had ever seen before. With the faint bit of moonlight outside, I could just barely see its face. I know this is gonna sound very weird, but its face was almost dog-like in appearance. It had a long nose and beady, hollow eyes. From what I could tell, its body was completely hairless. Not sure if it was just the moonlight outside or what, but its skin was a dark gray color with a bluish tint to it. Its eyes continuously darted from each of us, almost like someone hopped up on caffeine. It was creepy how jittery this thing was. It felt like an eternity for all of us sitting there, watching this thing watch us. Then, it started to descend from the window. Jimmy and Eric didn't move a muscle, yet for some reason, I felt drawn to the window. I peered outside and I saw it. Despite its massive size, it crawled down the side of the house like a spider. It crawled on all fours as it made its way to the ground below. Its hands were strangely human in appearance, but its hind legs were those of an animal, like a dog or maybe a wolf. Its head turned back to look up at the house, and I could just faintly see its beady eyes, darting around before it took off into the woods, disappearing beyond the darkened tree line. Eric, Jimmy, and I all sat there, staring at each other for a few moments before Peter came stumbling into the room, asking what the hell was going on. None of us said anything, but we all did end up sleeping in the same bedroom for the rest of the evening. The following day, as we all packed up to leave, I couldn't help but stare at the strange footprints in the dirt, leading off into the forest. What made me nervous wasn't the fact that these footprints confirmed that what we saw that night was real, but there were at least 10 more identical yet separate tracks, leading off in various directions. It's been close to a month since that, and I've been trying my best to forget about the whole event. I still have no idea what that thing was, but I doubt I'll be renting any more houses by a forest.